Hello there and welcome Virtual Space Hero community to another LinkedIn Live on a Thursday. It is a pleasure having you here with us and we would love to know your input today. Some of you already sent me a few questions beforehand and I'm really happy to pick them up because today we're talking about something very much related to what the whole month of July was about. We were focusing on hybrid teams and today I have a tremendous pleasure to have with me a senior expert in the field who is going to talk with me about creative collaboration in hybrid teams. And with that, I don't want to wait any longer, and I'm happy to welcome with me on the stage Penny Pullan, connecting from the middle of England.
Hello, lovely to be with you.
Hi, Penny. Thank you so much for making space in your busy calendar to join me on this LinkedIn Live and to talk about creative collaboration. It is fantastic because I've been following you for a few months now on LinkedIn and I just saw that your new book came out. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
I will do, and I can even show you. So yes, this book, Making Workshops Work, Creative Collaboration for Our Time, came out just a couple of weeks ago. In fact, less than that. I've spent the last year working on it. It's really thinking about how do we work together? How do we collaborate and innovate together in groups, whether we're in person, whether we're virtual, whether we're hybrid. And how do you lead that? How do you facilitate that? How do you make it happen?
That's fantastic because that's a very timely book. Since when have you been working on it?
Well, that's interesting. I actually got the publishing deal for it a few years ago, and then life got in the way. So I've been thinking about it for a long time, and actually I then sat down to write it partway into the pandemic. So it's good because I could bring in some of the experiences that I was learning from my clients and their reaction to working like this and working differently. I could bring that in and some of their stories as well.
Fantastic. Penny, you have been in the field of virtual facilitation or facilitation of virtual collaborative or hybrid collaborative projects for many, many years. So more than this year, it is 20 years, right, that you're in the field and doing what everybody or what many of us have been doing only since last year, right?
Well, yes, it's funny. I actually went virtual. 9/11 forced me to go virtual. So it's not quite 20 years. But I did a few years ago when this wasn't a known thing at all. I actually wrote my first book. Well, it was, I think, my third, actually. But anyway, I wrote a book about virtual leadership, practical strategies for getting the best out of virtual work and virtual teams. And this used to be a very niche topic indeed. In fact, lots of people had no idea what on earth virtual leadership meant. You know, people would laugh and say, virtual, doesn't that mean not quite? You know, you're talking about something that isn't quite leadership. That was my dad. He used to tease me rotten. But anyway, so I wrote this in 2016. You know, it was really well taken up by people like international project managers, program managers, people who were in remote teams. They loved it, but thankfully I'd written it quite generally. And last year it just took off. I mean, my royalties went through the roof and it became a bestseller in about the 4th year, which is very odd. But anyway.
Congratulations on that, really.
The great thing, it was able to help lots of people because I've been doing this for so long. I know we were talking earlier about a mutual friend, Nancy Settle Murphy, who's been living and breathing this for even longer than me. And when you have been grappling with this for a long time, then actually you know how things work, how things can work. And it's such a delight to be able to help people and to pass that knowledge on.
That's fantastic. And today we're going to talk about something super important. We're going to talk about virtual collaboration or hybrid collaboration. And it's also fun because when I started researching, I was a professor, I was researching new ways of working 10 years ago, starting it in Austria. It was also, it was a very, very big, very, very big. It was a small niche, of course, for me. And also I still remember the first events that I went to when I was talking about new ways of working or different ways of working, hybrid leadership and stuff like that. It was also something that not a lot of people were researching at that point in time in Europe. Of course, now the past 3 years, I've been seeing a lot of movement there. But let's move on to hybrid collaboration. So you, Penny, you mentioned already a friend of ours, Nancy. She was here on my show as well, talking about how to make hybrid teams effective and how to lead hybrid teams. If we talk about hybrid collaboration, what is it that you experience now is sort of the biggest or are the pain points of organizations?
Whoa. Yeah, well, lots of things. I think the thing is that people have now got used to using things like Teams and Zoom to do bog standard meetings. And generally they're used in a not very creative way. And lots of people are saying that as organizations are beginning to go back to the office, they're not all going back together. So instead of everybody being in the office or everybody being at home, both of which people have got used to, we're now coming to the situation where we will have some people in the office and some people remote, which means you have to work in this hybrid way. And what I'm hearing from lots and lots of people is we can't collaborate. We can't do creative things. We can't do innovative things collaborating when we are not all in the same room.
What do you think? How did this myth develop? Why did it develop?
Well, I think the truth is that we can't do creative collaboration the way people do their virtual team meetings. Most remote meetings are so poor. I don't know if you've seen many organizations running remote meetings, but they really are very basic, very poor, and they're not designed for engagement and collaboration. So, yeah, of course, it's true. People can't probably do really innovative work, really collaborative work, just at this really poor level that many organizations are in. And then if you go from virtual to hybrid, you throw extra complications in the mix, because all of a sudden you have people in the room together who can pick up on the nuances and dynamics of conversation. They can glance over to the other side of the room and they can see something, notice the body language, and they can immediately understand it, where the people who are remote won't pick that stuff up. So unless you really create something, design it for the situation, if you just sort of throw everything together and just assume it'll work in the moment, it's going to fail. But you can make it work.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I also think that the bar has been way too low for way too long. So whether it is a virtual collaboration, virtual trainings or virtual teaching, and I think really we have been seeing that the bar and people started to develop the skills and about the magic 6TM statements for clarity. What is that?
Yes, the magic 6. Perhaps you could show it to people. So this is, whoa, there we are. Brilliant. So this is something that I use with my clients and include it in my books. Both of the books have this in, which is 6 statements to use when you're planning and doing detailed preparation for meetings and workshops, but also at the start of any meeting or workshop to get enormous amounts of clarity. So let's start off. We start off in the middle at the top. We are here to. And this is where you use a few words, not an entire paragraph, to describe what's the point of your meeting. We are here to, I suppose for us, we're here to have a conversation about creative collaboration. What is that high level thing that describes what you're there to do? So make sure that's clear at the beginning of any meeting or workshop. And then you'll find people are much more focused. That purpose or the point of your session will give you all sorts of things. If you take it to the next level, it gives you the 4 or 5 objectives. That's today we will, and you can see on the side of the screen on the right hand side, you can see 5 blobs. So put in there what are the objectives that meet that purpose. I say don't go beyond 5 because otherwise it gets too much. Our plan is on the left. In fact, I'm going to point that way. Yeah, our plan is on the left and it shows the time plan. So when you're starting, when you're having breaks, and we know how important breaks are when you're doing anything virtual or hybrid, and when you're finishing and what are the chunks that you're covering. The next one below our plan is who's doing what, which is, what are the roles? Now, there might be small groups. There might be roles that everybody plays. You might have a timekeeper. You might have a scribe who's taking down actions. Very important to get those captured and shared live at the moment so people can object if they don't like their actions. Who's leading the session, facilitating, and so on. All these things you can get clear on and work out who's going to cover these things and get their agreement at the beginning of the session. The middle one, how we work together. There's a reason that all the people are standing on that, because that's where you develop your group norms for the session. Sometimes we talk about these as ground rules, but I don't ever refer to them as rules in meetings, because I find that people can respond. But yeah, so how we work together, the sort of things that you might have, one conversation at a time is always a good one. Much better to say that than, don't interrupt, because what does a human brain hone in on? Interrupt. So one conversation at a time is much better. When you're virtual and hybrid, things like if you have a lot of people, perhaps state your name at the beginning of any contribution you make, if it's hard to tell who's saying what. Yeah, all sorts of there are loads. We could spend all day just talking about how we work together. And if you're having a difficult workshop and some of your creative collaboration might be quite tricky, if you're doing something innovative, there might be conflict, there might be all sorts of things happening. If you can anticipate what some of the issues might be and then discuss them here and with the group, decide how you'll handle them if they happen, then it takes a lot of the stress off whoever's leading the workshop. So that's really helpful, really, whether you're in person or virtual or hybrid. And finally, we have the what's next, which is who's going to do what by when, the actions. Talk up front about how those actions will be captured and how you're going to follow up on them. Because far too many sessions, even ones where everyone's in the room, the actions just don't happen. There's a whole chapter in my workshops book about making those actions happen after sessions.
What I really liked, I think if I recall, it was Nancy saying that at the end of a meeting, it is always nice that you do not only sort of write down and assign tasks through a Trello card or whatever to somebody, but that you also have the participant, your team member, commit by saying it out what their action is.
Yes.
And I really like that because it combined sort of the project management, the tool that you're using, a Trello or whatever it is, with a more committed approach by having them say it again in whatever way you do that.
The thing that I would say to people is that you can also ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, how sure are you that when you are back at your desk, if everyone's virtual, they probably are at their desk, but on a scale of 1 to 10, once this meeting is over, how sure are you that you're going to be able to complete this? If people reply with less than 10, it's better to tweak the action so that they have a higher intent so that they can reply honestly 10. Better to have an imperfect action that actually happens than a perfect action that never sees the light of day.
And it's fantastic. I see here already. So Sveta is saying she's going to start to use this checklist. Fantastic, Nancy. So there's already application there. Thank you very much for showing us this approach. And I'm also I'm intrigued by it. But I was wondering, for example, the point of how do we work together? Is that something that you think it's necessary if it is a team that is meeting on a regular basis, because then you should in the best case have like team ground rules or norms, or would you still do that briefly?
I think it's easy if you are in a meeting that happens over and over, then you can pick up on what you've used before. It's always good just to run through, and there may be specific things for each individual workshop. So it's quite good to say, we'll use our norms here, this, and this. Let me know if anyone wants to tweak that. Let me know if you're happy. Get everyone to confirm, and then there may be a particular difficulty or challenge that you're facing, and it's good to go through how are we going to handle that if this happens, or if we find we don't come to consensus before the end of the session, how should we do that? How are we going to handle that? What are we going to decide to do?
Fantastic, very good points. And you were also writing and talking about how to foster interaction and engagement, because this is the basis for collaboration. So when you design, for example, for a collaborative working session and meeting with a team or for a company, what elements do you use in the design of the workshop in order to foster collaboration? What elements for interaction and engagement?
Lots. And in fact, there's a big chunk of the book is about this. So chapter 5 in my workshops book, Making Workshops Workbook, is all about choosing the appropriate activities. So by choosing the appropriate activities, you can design the different stages of your workshop, right from the activities that you have right at the beginning in the getting started, like using the Magic 6, for example, through to idea generation activities, problem solving, and so on, and then coming to consensus and making decisions, and all of those. So you can design the different aspects of your process, and you can think about interaction. So it may well be that you send people off into small groups. If you have a hybrid session, you can have the people who are in the room going into small groups with others in the room, and you can have people who are remote grouping up with others who are remote in breakout rooms. So just building in opportunities for interaction. There's something else that I use a lot for engagement, and that is, you've already seen from the Magic 6, I'm quite visual. But I love to use visual templates like the Magic 6 and others, and also use live drawing, both myself, but encouraging others to use live drawing as well, so that we can build things together. That does require collaboration tools, shared whiteboards where everybody can draw, and tools are quite useful as well. So I have myself, I use this little graphics tablet, very basic thing, but it just means that I can draw, and it'll appear on the screen in whatever tool I'm using, and it's more precise than trying to draw with a trackpad, which just, as people will know, it's not very it's not really very accurate.
When you use whiteboard, so that is a very common possibility that you use the whiteboard that is proposed by or embedded in the platform. Do you also use other tools for collaborative sessions? And we have seen the growth of Miro, and Miro, for example, was extraordinary from last year onwards. Yeah. Only few of the facilitators have been working with Miro before, but last year it sort of exploded. What are other tools that you would recommend?
Well, really, those two, I use Mural quite a bit, and I have something else called Collaboard or Collaborord. Anyway, there are lots out there. The most important one, especially if you're working with big organizations, is which ones will get through the firewall. And perhaps even more importantly, which ones are the people that you're going to be working with already using? Which ones are they comfortable with? Because there may be a stupendous tool that would be marvelous to use, but if everybody's battling with it, you don't want to use that one. Rather use the one that meets your requirements and that people know, and so they can use it and there's not a barrier in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think sometimes also what happened last year, as everybody was playing around with Miro or Mural, but didn't have the proper skills to facilitate a good session on Miro, it was sometimes I was really surprised that participants were so patient and stay on the session, even though they weren't even able to collaborate because the settings were not properly worked out, or the settings were just wrong for collaboration in the back end from the facilitator. But it is a very good point what you're saying, and I also think that it is, when I think about Cassie Labori, that I was talking to quite sometimes here on my Virtual Space Hero live show, that she was also saying it is not about the technology, it's about the objective. So also maybe sometimes it's better to go back to Jamboard or to go back to, I don't know, Google Slides, whatever it is, and not to be using Miro or Mural that might be too complicated for a certain group of participants.
Yes. And so, for example, I'm going to be running something at the end of August. So I will be having one-to-one sessions with each of the people. And in that, I would just check out that they're happy to do and able to do the things in Mural that I'm designing in for them. So that's helpful. The other thing is the technology, don't let it get in the way. It's there just as an enabler. So I like to think of it a bit like electricity in a house. It's vital, but electricity on its own does not make a house a home. Once you have it and it's working, think about all the other things. You wouldn't spend the whole time saying, I have 240 volts electricity in my house. I have 3 sockets in my study, or perhaps 5 or 6 in my kitchen. That's not the point. I care more about the fact I can actually use my mixer and make a cake. I can bake the cake and have people around, and I get a flick of a switch. I can put the lights on in the evening so that we can all see each other. That's what I care about, not the fact that I have this electricity. But without it, you couldn't really have a home. Certainly not in the winter in the UK.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And let's move a little bit to the creative collaboration part. And when we talk about hybrid teams, and I also see there is one more question here. So we have one question. Maybe we'll pick that up before we start talking about how to include remote colleagues into a hybrid session. And it comes again from Sveta here. We use collaborative assessment in the hybrid space this semester. Do you have any tips for assessment in the hybrid environment? Probably she's referring to skills assessment and how skills develop.
I'm afraid I'm not quite sure. So could you say a little bit more about what you mean?
Sveta, maybe it would be fantastic if you just pick up a little bit on the question, explain it a little bit further while we talk about how can you make sure to include remote colleagues, because this is one of the pain points when I talk to my clients always is, I have many organizations who just say no to hybrid meetings. They set up the rule virtual only, and just in case that there is a real need for a hybrid meeting, we go hybrid. Otherwise, virtual first, remote first. And maybe let's pick up on this question before we go to Sveta's point here. So Penny, what would you suggest to include remote colleagues? What is important in a hybrid collaborative setting? Okay.
The key thing is that unless you do things, if you have a hybrid setting, you do not have a level playing field. Ideally everybody would be equal. We'd all be at the same level. But actually in a hybrid team, it's like this. In a hybrid meeting, the people who are in the room have an advantage. If they were to try and kick a football or whatever, it would go downhill into the goal easy. And the remote people would be at this end trying to kick up to get to the goal. It is just not fair. And that's why so many people say we will not do hybrid meetings. We do all virtual, because then we're back to the level playing field. But there are other things you can do. There are some things that work quite well. So can you put a physical reminder of the remote people into your actual meeting room? One of my clients uses life-size cartoon cardboard cutouts of the people who are not
What are they
present
using?
in the room.
Wait. You should repeat that. What are they using?
I will say that slowly. So they have cartoons, pictures of the people that have been drawn life-size, just the head and body. They put it on a chair in the meeting room. So when the people in the meeting room look around, they can see those people, because the problem is that remote people get forgotten. So it takes a little bit of it out. It helps people to remember. You can also do that with name tents, but it's not as powerful as actually seeing people's faces. So I think that's brilliant. I learned that from a bank. Oh, that was a long time ago, about 10 years ago. But very helpful.
Probably now they switched to the small robots that you can have also at the meeting room table. They are like as this small, where people can really zoom in or participate remotely in a hybrid meeting. And they're also just like beside me. It's just a computer and the face there.
The face is important to be able to connect. We really do connect with faces. So that's important. Yeah, okay. So a physical thing is very important. The other thing that you can do is it's all about how do you really connect those remote people in. So something that can help is having each remote person is paired up with an in-room buddy. So that can be really helpful, so that they might have a chat going on, so that the remote person can say, "I can't hear. Can you ask them to move the microphone?" Or there's just somebody in the room, and part of their role is to support their remote person and stand up for them and to make sure and to answer any questions that they have. So that can work as well. And there are a few other things that you can do as well. But just keep that whole thing remote first in your mind. Instead of, the natural thing to do is to forget the remote people. It's human nature just to connect with the people in the room, to look around and see them. We need to break that and always think remote first. So if you're going to ask questions, ask the remote people first, for example. And don't have horrible little, those star microphones in the middle of a boardroom, miles away from, it seems, from anybody. Make sure the audio is really good. Audio is almost more important than video, so that the people who are remote can hear absolutely everything that's happening in the room.
I think that's a very good point, that very often we focus very much on camera setup and we forget about how important the audio is. So what, for example, I think I talked about this with another colleague from the learning and development field, that it also sometimes is helpful that you have a co-facilitator who is sort of nurturing the chat with the most important messages that might not be on a slide, that you are saying as the main facilitator. Do you do co-facilitation when it comes to hybrid collaborative meetings, for example?
Absolutely. I'd recommend to have a second pair of eyes and ears. Very, very helpful. What's in a small meeting, I have a small meeting coming up, and there will be a second person to provide support, but also to be a second pair of ears and eyes. They don't need to be the same level of facilitation skills, but certainly having that support is very helpful.
Fantastic. And when it comes to interaction and engagement, so you mentioned that you group, for example, you're using sort of a buddy system for the in-presence participants and the remote the remote participants. Would you also then group them together when it comes to sort of a brainstorming activity, or do you rather have the in-presence and the remote people working together in their own environments?
I would tend to have the in-room people working together in their own small groups, and then get the remote people to work together in their own breakout rooms. But you can mix and match it. It really depends on who the people are, who it makes sense to work together, the numbers that you've got. You really need to design it given the situation you have, the context, the people, the purpose. It depends is the answer to almost any question anybody asks me about about stuff. Yeah.
I'm going to try another question, even though I might get it. It depends, because I totally understand that. But if you think about the workshops that you were running, the hybrid collaborative workshops that you were running, usually how long are they? Do you think that they should be maybe even shorter than a purely virtual one or a purely in presence one? Or are they about the same length that you can be productive for 1.5 hours or whatever? What is your experience?
Ooh, 1.5 hours, you really need to want to be there to stay completely focused when you're in front of a screen. So where possible, have your slots, your interactive slots, an hour or so. Have breaks, get people out, get them doing exercises, things on their own, and then come back. But don't have long sessions sitting in front of the screen for more than about an hour. I mean, you can push it a bit. If everybody's super, super keen, you might get 90 minutes, but don't go beyond that.
Okay, fantastic. When you think about the most recent sessions that you were facilitating, what is the size that you facilitate, and what different challenges do you encounter, whether it is a smaller or a bigger group, and what is big for you?
So I think for me, the ideal group when you're doing virtual or hybrid is probably a little bit smaller than if everyone was in the room. So about sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 is lovely. I think when you're all in the room, I would switch to large group facilitation methods once I was around 15 people. And when I've got remote or hybrid, I do that a little bit earlier because it's much easier to talk and share ideas and things in a small group virtually. So if you have maybe a group of 3 or 4, that's much easier than, say, a group of 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, a whole group. It gets much harder to have those conversations. So I would envisage splitting people into a lot of quite small groups and then presenting back.
Would it be also the number that you suggest to have a co-facilitator if it's 7, 8, 9, or do you always have a co-facilitator?
Well, I would want to have a technical support person, and if they can do a little bit of co-facilitation or certainly be eyes and ears and feed that in, even better.
Okay, fantastic. One question, Penny. I would really love to know what your projects are about. So tell us a little bit, if you want, some of the collaborative brainstorming session that you're facilitating, and maybe one workshop that you designed that you're particularly proud of.
Oh, I'd love to tell you so many things, but of course, client confidentiality is a big, big problem because there's so many things that I can't mention at all. Thinking of volunteering, I've been doing various things, helping out organizations since the pandemic happened. Sometimes things which are, some community sessions, for example. So there was quite a fun hybrid one where there were about 50 people in a building, and then there were even more people on a Zoom call. I think we had about 70 people on a Zoom call. And I wasn't the overall facilitator, but I was sort of facilitating. I was in the room, but representing all the virtual people. So we were interacting, we were doing a lot via chat, and we were feeding our comments through into the bigger meeting. But that was much more of a sort of public engagement meeting than But that was good. And in fact, it felt like a party. I think those of us on the Zoom call were actually having rather more fun than the people in the room. And and I think the people in the room noticed that. And that's not what you'd expect. You'd expect the people in the room would be having a great time, and the people stuck on the screens would be bored sick. But it was the other way around. We were having a wonderful time because I was drawing people out, and I was relaxed, and people were getting into the spirit and sending in lots of ideas and chatting, and interesting.
This is super cool. I think it's fun. What do you think made the atmosphere feel like a party? What do you think was it? Did you have a DJ or something?
No, but you see, it was the way you come to something like this. If you're the facilitator, if you're the workshop leader, the way you come, the energy you bring makes an enormous difference. If you are relaxed and excited and engaged and interested in them and what they have to say, and you encourage people when they say things, it's sort of it's catching.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. I also think, I'm not sure what your feeling is, but I also have been working in the virtual space for many years already. But still, even though I would say I have facilitated like really a lot of workshops or taught a lot for universities all over the globe, but still, my personal perception is I need like twice as much energy when I go live online compared to an in-present settings. Is it something that will change when I'm 20 years in the field, or will it be always the same?
Yes, but the thing is, you see, you can either rely on you to bring all the energy and you can be completely crazy, or you can design in energy, things that will energize into your remote or hybrid session. So I like to get people, I like to throw in some curiosity, for example, because that normally, you know, if you've got a whole load of people and they're all slumped in front of the screen like this, then if you do something really odd and unexpected, then they sort of go, oh, what's happening? What's happening? And wake up, and they're curious. So you can use things like that, you know, to focus their brain, go through different states, and curiosity is a very useful one. And then the other thing you can do is invite people to move their bodies, especially if they've been sitting for a long time. So, you know, why not stand up, you know, and stretch, and then sit down again and see what it feels like. And people will feel different.
It's a very nice point. It also changes perspective. The moment that I stand up when we're thinking about something, when we're discussing something, I encourage people to also move around if they have a Bluetooth setup, for example, because it changes perspective as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic, great points.
Or give people 10 minutes and say, right, don't disconnect, but just walk outside. Answer these 3 questions while you're walking around a green space or walking outside. Make sure you're back here for 10 minutes time, and then we'll hear your thoughts. You don't have to leave people sitting in front of the screen.
Yeah. Very good point. Green environments always sort of stimulate our thinking processes differently. Let me pick up again as a last question what Sveta was putting there. So Penny, if you think about how you facilitate trainings, for example, when you train organizations about how to collaborate in a hybrid context, and you do that in a hybrid way, maybe even, how do you design or how do you assess learning transfer? Do you have the feeling that those who are joining in online or those who are joining in presence sort of capture the ideas earlier, or how do you design for learning transfer? I think that would be the question here.
Okay, so I think for learning transfer, you need to design something very interactive. You need to have lots of questions. It needs to be not just content driven. So rather than presenting stuff, why not give people questions and get them to find it? And then almost the assessment, have they actually picked that up, is from their answers. I know there are all sorts of, you can use tools and so on. If you're doing remote training, you can have part of it could be some sort of online course where you have built-in assessments where you can check how much people have done. But certainly, you know, you can just ask people. So you know, how are you going to apply this? What's your perspective on that? What have you taken in today? Yeah.
So it would be also to design for the experience and for the application of whatever we are talking them through.
Yeah, if you want transfer, then design for it.
Fantastic. So I would really suggest head over to Penny's webpage, makingprojectswork.co.uk, check out the valuable resources that Penny is sharing online. Also follow her and connect with her here on LinkedIn, and enjoy all the content that Penny is sharing, and engage in the conversation. It would be really fantastic. And with that, Penny, thank you so much for your time being here with us. It was a tremendous pleasure sort of getting all your 20 years of knowledge of working in a virtual and hybrid context. It was tremendous. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining Virtual Space Hero.
Thank you very much for having me. And I'm glad I didn't just say it depends all the time.
But I do know that's so difficult, because all the questions very often, it depends. I do know that. Thanks a lot for making the points. Bye.
You.
Thank you very much, Virtual Space Hero community, for sending us your questions, for providing us with your comments. I am now off to a very hot evening here in Spain, and I hope you also enjoy your day, your morning, your afternoon, or your evening, or your night, wherever you are based. And with that, I invite you, next week, we are going to talk about virtual town halls. So I hope you join me in that conversation. It will be for sure extraordinary. And with that, I close as usual. Let's become a virtual space hero. Thanks a lot for joining.